that looks like forum. So yeah, thank you all for coming to the AI for Epistemics Hackathon. I'm going to be doing demos now. So people have been busy hacking over the last 8 hours or so. I am very excited to see what everyone has produced. How the demos will work is that you'll have 2 minutes up here. Come up, bring your laptop, you'll just plug in, and then you can just present and talk we'll time you for 2 minutes. After that, we'll let people ask a few questions. The judges sitting on the table over there might have questions. The audience might have questions. Probably about 3 questions per project. And then we'll move on to the next one. We'll do a round of applause and then move on. So that's the general structure. Pretty straightforward. Any questions before we get started?
You would give us time.
Sure. Or I'll do the timing and then I'll just count you when you have 15 seconds left.
Yeah.
I'll put up my hand. Okay. All right.
Do we know roughly how many projects there are?
I don't. I would estimate about 10. Janet?
Can you do the lightning clock and put your computer on a shelf over there?
I guess it's okay. I kind of want to use my computer, but
That's fair.
maybe I'll do that. Okay, so we currently have 6 projects, and I think a few people are submitting a few more. So estimate about 10, 6 to 10. All right, with that, let's get started. Ben, would you like to go first? Because you have to run.
I would like to go first. Thank you. Okay, so I worked with William Saunders, and we came in today wanting to work on using LLMs to pretty directly make some sort of important decision. So I feel like I've done a lot of passing around and gather evidence that's relevant to the decision or whatever. We ended up with screening projects on Manifund, which is maybe a somewhat important or important adjacent decision, but one that we can actually, that we actually make in our world. So basically screened a few by hand to identify what I was looking for, which was basically what is the causal story for how this project can help with the transition to, the transformative AI transition. And then ask Sonnet to do that and give a score for all these projects. That's useful because there's 600 or so it's sort of a lot to do by hand. I found that the scores, or the ordering here, is relatively reasonable. And then, so in addition to this ordering, which I think is helpful just to be okay, what should I look into more? Because I think, if you just go to manfund.com, it's somewhat overwhelming. I also wanted to have the model start doing some of the reasoning that I would want to do as part of vetting the grant more carefully. So, for instance, here we have a fairly highly rated write a good primer on political change. So I'm okay, what the hell is that? How is that useful? The model's able to give a sort of decent summary here of what this is, and that this would be helpful for trying to do AI policy, which maybe is kind of obvious, but it's not actually mentioned in the grant. I thought that was a little bit of insight that was kind of nice. Yeah, that's it.
Questions?
Wow, what sort of bits were in your prompt?
Yeah, so it's so a grant description to vet, and then the structure is first of all, what is this project doing? Then what are plausible stories for ways that the project, sorry, I can make that bigger, could have impact on transportive AI going well, and what's the pathway look like, what are the barriers, then an overall assessment of promise. Yeah.
This is based on the evidence from just from the Manifund page itself. It's not doing research out of any other sources.
That's right. Yeah, I think the next thing I want to do is look at the people involved in the project, including like a quick Google.
Did you have like evals or some way of like assessing how good the results of the like LLM scoring was?
So I reviewed like 4 or 5 of them fairly carefully myself. That was about it. I was pretty happy with those. Yeah, I think what would have been interesting is to look at regranters and how they what they gave to, and how does that make sense with the SES? Yeah.
All right. If no further questions, thank you so much, Ben. All right. And then I guess I'll be calling people in basically submission order from here. So first off, we have Gustavo.
Hello. How do I plug this in?
And I'm actually going to add it to 3 minutes instead of 2 minutes.
Okay, so I don't have like a slideshow or anything. I just have like news pages. I just like browsing the news sometimes. And one of the reasons I like to browse the news is because it helps me predict the future. Right? And so I've always wanted this thing that would help me interpret the news more precisely or more meaningfully by having questions that I can extract from the news and possibly get feedback from my forecasting community. So what I built was this browser extension that generates questions based on the content of the web page. So,
Can you zoom in?
so I can zoom in, I guess. Oh shit! Oh no!
Screenshot.
I could screenshot, I suppose.
You can read them out, yeah.
Screenshot.
It might work if you do the like pinch.
Yeah, it's bad, it doesn't work.
Oh, this doesn't work?
Pinch zoom doesn't work.
On the screenshot.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I know, but I'm trying to do that. Oh, I may need to go to the.
Just read out the questions, maybe.
Yeah, I'll just read that. Okay. So, the first one says, will the new round of tariffs in Canada and Mexico by President Trump be implemented by the end of the year? And then it's just like rating how interesting this is, how important this is, some guesstimated probability, and then there's a link to copy and a link to create a question on manifold. So click the link. There it is. And manifold. Yeah, and it doesn't work on every site. It works most of the time, but like ideally, you wouldn't have any text about other pieces of news. And yeah, pretty good on Wall Street Journal. Pretty good on New York Times. If anybody wants me to click on something here, just let me know.
5 things to watch in Trump's address to Congress? Or, okay,
Oh,
this one.
sorry. I would. Let me go. Which one?
On the left side.
Left side?
Yeah, down one more.
Down a bit more.
Yeah.
5 things to watch.
Oh, I see. Yep. Great. So now we can generate questions related to this. Generate questions. Yeah, will Trump's forceful address to Congress lead to an increase in total ratings by the end of the year? Will Trump's speech have a noticeable impact on the stock market, leading to a 2% increase in the Dow Jones by the end of the year? And will Trump's address result in a significant decrease in illegal immigration numbers by the end of the year? Right, and you can also just copy, and then you can, do that yourself, or you can just go directly to manifold. That is it.
Let's stay there for questions.
Oh yeah, questions.
Is it reading in the comments for the article too? If it's displayed on the page?
I think it's taking everything that's in that page. So if the comments are visible, then probably, yeah.
So ads.
What's that?
Advertising.
Good question. if the advertisements are in the form of text, which mostly are, they're not these days, I imagine that would also be used. Yeah, sure.
How are you telling the model what makes a good question? Like, so for example, I'm thinking about will X lead to an increase in Y type of question, where maybe it's like pretty hard after the fact to tell whether X led to Y.
I don't like it. I think I need to refine the prompting to get it to be more resolvable. And I've been pushing in that direction, but maybe not far enough. Yeah.
If they become resolvable, it might be nice to ground the guesstimates.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in how much money it would have lost over the previous curve.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'm not taking these guesstimates seriously at all. It's just if people wanted to sort which is the best question for them to publish, they might prefer one that's closer to 50% over one that's like 90%. But it's not, I'm not taking this as a serious forecast by any stretch.
Yeah, is it few short examples or just instructions for like how the model's generating the questions? Just curious about that.
I didn't journal my work on that, but I mean, if you want, I could open up the prompt that I'm using. Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe every one of these should be like show the prompt.
So where is my cursor? This is it. Yep. Now I have to search for a prompt. So one downside of using cursor is you don't necessarily know where you're going. Oh, here it is. Here's a prompt. So yeah, please read the following content from URL. Come up with some very, very basic, resolvable binary yes/no questions regarding how the situation will have developed by the end of the year. To be resolvable, the question needs to define a clear deadline, e.g. by the end of the year. For clarity, it's always best to write down specific dates, since words like now, today, this week, etc. will change meaning with time. When possible, instead of vague terms like noticeable or significant, talk about percentage changes or record highs or lows over some time period. Please try to specify metrics and or reliable data sources that make the questions more specific and verifiable. Make a table with each of these questions as a row. Columns are interestingness, importance, and guesstimated probability from 0 to 100%. And content colon. And then
Wait, did you actually use GPT 3.5?
It's GPT-4, 4.5, I guess. Sorry. Oh wow, 3.5. So maybe it's gonna work even better.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chicago.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Campbell Hutchinson demoing synchronesis. Fun word.
Yes, it turns out it's a real word. I asked GPT 4.5 to make something up. Okay. Let's see. Display. Does anyone know how you get the thing to just wait.
We've been having a problem with some computers in that particular table, so I'm going to get you a different table, and why don't we have someone else?
You have a
Easy mic.
track on it.
Oh yeah, you just have to share my own laptop. That was fine.
Okay, that looks good.
Okay. Cool.
Nice.
Beautiful.
And you have 3 minutes.
No clue what is going on. Literally everything that's ever existed is trying. Okay, so I'll just say at the start that what I think is that one of the things that's most exciting about LLMs is the ability to generate like beautiful UIs on the fly. Because I think the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues with the world right now is that is that UI UX is extremely expensive, but LLMs have the ability to change that. And so what I made was I made a comment merger for less wrong, so that basically what it does is it takes whatever are the comments on a page. Okay, that's not good. Is it takes okay, it takes whatever are the comments on a page and it merges them into the page. Oh my God. It merges them into the page so that you can see whatever the disputes are. So I'm just going to pick a random thing. I haven't done this before. This is not this one. This is completely live. Okay, it still won't let me click it. I have no clue what's going on. But what it would do is if I use the extension, this is a working browser extension, and it would go through, it would pull all of the paragraphs, it would pull all of the comments, it would match the comments up against the paragraphs to see if the comments are relevant to the paragraph, and then it would highlight with whatever the dispute is between the comment and the paragraph so that you can see when somebody doesn't agree with whatever the statement is. So let's see if I can get this to work. Reanalyze the page. This has been sort of cursed so far, so.
It didn't look like you clicked the button.
Okay, my cursor strangely disappears when I click this.
It shows up on the monitor behind you.
Okay, now it's doing this. Okay, so it's starting the paragraph analysis. We have a little tracker that shows the progress. We can filter by like the upvote threshold so that we only highlight if it has a sufficient number of upvotes. And this is from the minimum to the maximum. There's a little bug where it says 0%, but if I moved it a little bit, it would actually switch to just the number of upvotes because I found that like much more helpful. And what it does is it shows you factual disputes, inferential disputes, definitional disputes, value-based disputes, and also extrapolations, which is where people have looked at the text and sort of like thought about it and said things. So I can just like pick a random one, and I've never done this one before, so we'll see. Okay, so for some reason it's still sort of like, the screen is still not responsive.
I think your cursor positioning is weird. Turn the laptop around and like look at the big screen while you're clicking.
That's reasonable. I might try that. Okay, let's see. Okay, oh, whoa, yes, okay. So when I go over, it tooltips, gives me an explanation of what it is and a short thing. I can click on it, and then if I want, I can, okay, I'll have to look at that again. I can go to the product. So yeah, so that's the project. Cool.
That's very cool.
Sorry, can you just go to one of them and read it out loud so we know what the
sure.
is and so on?
Okay, I don't guarantee that this one is good, but we'll pick this one. Okay, we'll do this operational H1 cluster, and then it says, the comment implies skepticism or clarification about the statement regarding 100K H100 systems. And then so here's the comment, Vladimir Nesov, factual 0 points. The first started appearing in the later part of this year. And so, let's see if I can manage this. Go to comment. This should disappear. I don't know why it's not.
That ratio is sus.
There are publicly known training systems this large. The first 800 is appearing in the later part of this year. The training configures must include smaller experiments. In aggregate, eat more compute than the largest training run. So it's disputing the fact.
Cool. Cool. Questions? Anyone have questions for Kempo?
How are you doing coding?
How am I doing coding? The coding here is not done in any advanced way. The LLM is grabbing the quotes and then surfacing them. So the LLM, when it goes and decides if the comment is relevant to the text, also pulls out the quote that it thinks makes that comment.
Meaning it's generating the quote, right? It's
Exactly,
not, so it's not guaranteed to be exactly.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed. Yeah?
Moving forward, should the website just let you comment on stuff?
That would be a wonderful addition. My belief is that that would be a wonderful use case. Using GPT-4o might be expensive because this actually does burn tokens. But yeah, that would be a great addition. But this is showing what we can do with like ephemeral software. Yeah.
Another boring title question. How do you get it to highlight the spans correctly?
Okay. That is a great question. And the answer is I have no clue because I got Claude Coder to do it for me.
Like the language model, right?
Yeah, this is my guess is that it's doing it with regex. But I'm not 100% sure. I did have to play to get it beautiful though. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like this feels like very, very polished as far as like the popovers looking reasonable and everything.
Cool. Okay, thank you, everybody.
All right, next up we have David Nachman presenting Square Table.
He's remote.
Oh, okay. Let's skip him and we'll come back to him with the analysis. We got to figure that out. Then we have detecting fraudulent research with Panda and Charlie.
All right. So that's visible. Yeah. Specific thing we were looking at is there's a lot of research out there. A lot of it's like bad. What research is bad? How do you know? So we specifically just collected a set of here's a bunch of general papers. Here's a set of papers we know are retracted. We fairly naively asked the model hey, look at this paper. Here are some things that retracted papers often do. Do a peer review and then say at the end, how confident are you that this paper is retraction worthy? So I guess one note is we're not trying to predict actual probability of retraction because we know the base rate for this is extremely low. But there are plenty of papers that probably should be retracted that aren't. And so kind of what we're asking for is more of that number than what is the actual rate of retraction. So we ran against about 100. Or we did a larger test later, but to start we ran about 100 and about 8 showed a greater than 50% probability, and so we just spot checked all the ones that that the model said was fraudulent, and they all seemed pretty fraudulent to us. A lot of these are pretty blatant.
So
where it's
where did you get the 100?
So this was based on a data set of papers that passed through screening in Elicit's report pipeline. This is a paper that's been found. Basically, if you did a semantic scholar search and you found some papers and you filtered them based on kind of textual criteria, was it an RCT and stuff. So these are basically real user queries. Actual users are looking for these papers. They're not randomly selected across all papers. So in some sense, you would expect them to be better than average, than the absolute average paper if you were randomly sampling across all papers. And yeah, so most of the ones that are wrong are pretty obviously wrong. It's copy pasted text or just extremely grammatically incorrect text that doesn't really make sense. If you read it as a human, you'll just be is it kind of incoherent?
But it does pick up on more subtle stuff it cites papers only from this time period, 2 decades ago, or it applies the wrong model, or it makes too many assumptions, and so yeah, it does pick up more nuanced stuff than just grammatical errors.
Yeah. Yeah, the grammatical errors are it's I guess cool because there's a lot of stuff that is really low hanging fruit. Here's our distribution and some notes, and I can share this if desired. But yeah, we actually do notice bad math, for example, and we made a little web app that's in the link, so you can also see it. I'm just showing you the local copy. So this is one of the papers that was just extremely obviously wrong, and we have this analysis. Here is one of the papers that was fine, so we confirmed that it's not false positiving on everything. And here's a case where it actually detected wrong math.
That's great. Any questions for Panda and Charlie?
Can you show us some of the bad stuff in the
Yeah.
report?
And
how do you know it wasn't just grammatical errors, but
yeah, so this is one of the ones that was in my this is one of the ones where it's pretty easy. It feels almost unfairly easy.
Yeah.
If you just read that abstract, and you're kind of oh yeah, this is completely nonsensical. So yeah.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, so I think first of all, I thought you were talking about you know, like people who do medical studies, right, that are elaborate, but they like something's fraudulent in their data analysis. But
So-
this is maybe just like they just make up an entire paper.
Right. We thought like we should go for those cases, but it turns out there's actually just tons of cases of just like nonsense like this.
Yeah.
And so we thought we could filter out kind of the low hanging fruit.
So thi-
and it's already a big improvement.
Yeah, and this is the other one. This is the one that was kind of in the mid-range that I showed you the number for. I can't remember the exact percentage. And so this one is more like what you're describing. It like looks like a pretty reasonable paper at first glance. And the model specifically calls out things like these Western blots being suspicious. It says like, actually, if you read the paper, these like experimental conditions are like pretty different, and you would expect these Western blots to look pretty different, and they're all like almost identical. And it like basically points out like a bunch of data analytical errors. So this one's like feels much more subtle. Like I could not look at this and immediately judge that it seemed wrong. And this is an actually retracted paper. These are like the base truth retracted papers. And then we obviously tested the things that are not false, and this is the one that was successful. It's not that interesting to read. It's like a normal paper. But yeah.
So I was just curious, is your approach multimodal? So like, is it also looking at the figures itself, or is it just looking at the text? So like, how would it know that the Western blot is looking funky?
Yeah, so the ones we did in Claude AI I think are multimodal, but the ones where we did like the largest sample are just text-based.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, all the ones that I ran in this like individual app are all using Cloud 3.7, this like PDF reading capability.
Did you find any false positives? Like, just flag this retracted?
Well, I actually uploaded a blog post that I wrote, so I'm not quite at 100%, but we'll iterate over time.
How well did it fit the like data set that you were using to iterate against, and like did you test it with any? Did you have any test sets separate from that set?
Not really. We mostly just confirmed it did pick up the redacted papers, and the stuff that it picked up, which wasn't actually redacted, was like pretty fraudulent. We didn't have like more evaluation than that.
Okay, yeah.
So I guess one notice we specifically picked up stuff that wasn't already redacted, that like we looked at and we're like, oh, this definitely should have been redacted.
Yeah. And among the like original 100 papers that you were trying out, you basically just like got all of them in the same way as.
We got all of them?
Like you said, you started out with picking out like you were like iterating against some data sets where you had the ground truth about whether they were redacted or not.
In the data set of 100, we did not have the ground truth.
Oh, I see.
So we had like 5 or 6 papers that I just manually went through and like did all the work to get redacted papers, retracted papers, and just like kind of went back and forth and be like, okay, like what is detecting these reliably look like?
Cool.
Do you have any idea in terms of the distribution across domains, like in your validation set? Is there any domains like that are specifically prone to be fraudulent or be picked up by the model?
We didn't like specifically run against that metadata, even though we do have it. I'm like pretty confident the answer is that like, oh, weird social studies papers from like the cryptocurrency banking kind of thing. I mean, I don't actually know what journal that would be in, but like, you know, a lot of the really obvious ones are like in tiny journals by unheard of authors who are like, you know, like more empirical research is tends to do that.
Cool. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Next up, we have Evan Hadfield with Artificial Collective Intelligence.
Oh, yeah, this is HDMI. Does that
We have
a-
USB-C.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So, cool. What I was interested in exploring was, I just choose a. Cool. In simulating with LLMs, a popular, I did not build this, I'm very clear. This is just a example dialogue tool. You get a bunch of participants, you ask them an open-ended question, they see what other people submitted, and they can go through and agree, disagree with the stuff that they see from other people. It broadly follows the community notes algorithm, to find consensus amongst any group of people responding in open-ended ways to a prompt. So I wanted to see what we could do with LLMs and extract maybe some interesting knowledge from having LLMs simulate participants from a range of perspectives. So I spent too much time on the platform, so I don't have a whole lot to demo here that's intriguing. But I can show the output of what it could look like. What is a ethical principle?
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yep. Across humanity. And you could specify how many participants you want to be in this process, or sorry, how many submissions from each participant. You could specify some number of participants, and you could add some custom participants. Maybe you have like demographic groups in mind, or like specific personalities you want represented here, and then run the simulation. And if this didn't work, it would result in seeing a collection of submissions from these participants, and then it would find where there's consensus in the voting and the ranking of the participants against other submissions. Oh, hey, it's actually, I'm surprised. So I'll jump over here to some outputs because I don't think that's actually going to finish. So you can kind of get a feel for this. It's generating, based on the prompt query, it's prompted to generate like its own diverse set of participants. So it auto-populates the participant roles based on the prompt, gives them instructions for how they are to like act in engaging with this prompt, runs the prompt by asking basically every participant for some number of submissions or responses, designing as urban transit, blah, 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 cars are terrible, and then it solicits votes from all these participants across the entire suite of responses that were solicited from the participants. And the goal here that I think is interesting and would be interesting to play with down the road is just finding where there's statistically high consensus on kinds of, and consensus meaning from a wide range of perspectives on any number of prompts. Yeah.
Questions for Evan?
Yeah.
Do you see added functionality to where you can customize each participant to like the extremity of their opinions, or maybe like affirmative or
Yeah, I could imagine just having like a slide, like kind of an equivalent to like temperature for an LLM, just like how extreme of a range of perspectives do you want to have engage with this? That's totally a variable you could, I'd love to play with adding.
Why did you choose to use Polis versus some other like Reddit or?
So it was easy to get something started, and it's not really the Polis algorithm. It's actually just asking all the participants. And the nice thing of simulating is like Polis is specifically these kind of dialogue tools that are out there are designed, and like the community notes algorithm is designed with sparse participation in mind. So it has to like infer lots of data. But if you can simulate them, you can just ask them to vote on every single thing. And that's what I did. I just asked them to rank every submission. And if compute gets cheap, then we could do all kinds of simulation.
Hey, I wasn't that clear on the steps. So you generate the participants, and then at some point they vote in the end. But like, what was the intermediate thing?
And the intermediate thing is you basically give the prompt to these participants, and they come up with multiple responses each to the prompt. Those submissions go into a pool, and then they all vote on their favorite.
Okay. Yeah. So there's not a like discussion phase. Or something.
Yeah, this is not a discussion tool. Yeah.
How are you thinking about seeing how well this replicates what people would say? Like evaluating how well it's simulating what it's...
Yeah, so I could actually take Polis data, like the one I showed you about like what is an ethical principle that I believe everyone should follow. Take that data, give it to an LLM, or like the same prompt. You can think of like the community that you give this prompt to, and create some participants that like are somewhat representative of that, and see where there's high consensus amongst the LLM responses, and do those things differ, and the things that have very, very low consensus, or where do they agree on like high consensus amongst LMs, high consensus among humans, low consensus LMs, low consensus humans. Where are the big divergences? Cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Evan. Three left. We have now Raymond Arnold on Thought Logger and Cyborg extension.
So a lot of my thoughts right now are gearing up for, like, in about 2 years, I think AIs will be really good, and then they'll kill us a little while after that. And I want to think a lot of thoughts real fast during that golden hour window. So I'm trying to build tools that I think will be sort of like general tools that get me into a habit of, like, when I notice a fairly complicated thing I could do that I might want to do all the time if it was easy, I can, like, easily turn it into a one-button thing that I can do all the time. So this was in pursuit of that, I had some tools I had already been building, and today I focused on iterating a bit on them with a focus on making useful predictions, which was having LLMs make useful predictions for my decision making. So the first of my two tools is called Thought Logger, and it's just a keyboard logger that just logs everything I type. It doesn't log passwords because of how Apple's API for key tracking works, so that's nice to not have them stored. And then it exposes them on a local server that only you can use, so you can, like, kind of just be storing all your private thoughts. You don't have to figure out how to integrate separately with, like, Google Docs and Slack and, like, every other tool. Just like the things you're thinking about across all domains will be sort of like all in one context. And then that means if you're, like, on some random website, maybe if you're, in this case, on you're, like, I don't know, in a Google Doc where you're, like, thinking about you're doing your weekly planning or whatever, you can, I separately have this Chrome extension, which is basically a prompt library. It, like, anything that is, like, a fairly complicated prompt that I want to run over and over again, I can just make a little, like, kind of button for that I use a lot. So the one I worked on today is generate 3 to 5 predictions that are, like, relevant to what I'm currently working on. And what this does is it looks at my logs from today and yesterday. My logs from today and yesterday look like this. Here's everything I thought today. It's a lot of thoughts. And then here's everything I thought yesterday, which also looks, you know, kind of like that. But it is smart enough to figure out that basically, like, the major projects I was thinking about my keylogger, I was thinking about Facebook. Much like Gustavo, we can't zoom in on the Chrome extension, so let's zoom in on that to see some predictions that it made. Are these ones useful? Because I just ran them right now. They've sort of varied on how useful they turn out to be. There's the good old number 4. After 6 months of doing this, will I look back and think, well, that was a whole lot of time building tools and not enough time actually thinking? That's I am 35% on that. And the idea with these is, like, if it seems important, I can copy it, and then I also have the Facebook Chrome extension, so it's, like, pretty easy to, like, paste it in here, and sure, I'll put 35% on that one. And then I can paste my my Facebook Chrome extension things in here. So as I'm doing my daily thinking, I have a nice little pipeline for, hey, what did I do yesterday? What are some predictions that might be useful to think about? And if they and the ones that seem useful, I can then make some quick predictions about. Some other ones that came up earlier in the day were like, will I have any users at all in that thought it was good in, like, 2 weeks? Yep. So.
Clarification, which of these things did you do today?
The thing I worked on today was iterating on the prompt for the getting the predictions to be, like, kind of a useful set of predictions, which that prompt's over here, and fully connecting the yesterday and today's logs into the making those accessible to the Chrome extension, which I had almost built but not quite integrated yet, so that the prediction prompt would have access to them. Yeah.
I was curious. I mean, there's some tools that just do this with a screenshot, right?
There's
something like this, like using LM to then search in the screenshots.
Yeah, I also have that functionality on my thing, but I've found I personally like the keylogging more because it's just like way more succinct, or like that doesn't take up so much storage space, and it's basically the parts I wanted most of the time. But I have that as a to-do of figure out. Any others? Cool. All right.
Alright, I think our last in-person demo is... Actually, no, we have one more submission from Ollie. Great. So, but Tillman Bayer first, double proxies in the New York Times, The Conversation.
Cool. Yeah. So it is about analyzing political debates in a long-running format in New York Times. And yeah, it's called The Conversation. So this is like a liberal and a conservative journalist, and they basically every week they like talk about the topic of the day, Trump of course a lot, and honestly, I'm not such a big a fan of format. One reason I'm not such a big a fan is it's kind of pretty waffling, right? So you actually like read this and you kind of think what are they really disagreeing about. So of course that's what we have our tools for. And to recap, right, everybody, that's the last strong definition of double praxis. Basically, reads all of it, but basically you convert difference in opinion into factual questions that you hope to be able to review. Cool. And so the aim is to do this automatically, like this 12 years of material. Right? So mostly worked on GitHub for 10 years, I think. This is going to be reading out by Chrome. So you give it the example from the lesson definition actually with the behavior that's swimming in a lake is safe, depending if they are crocodiles or not. And with some tweaking, I got to that fairly okay. So that's one result. Basically the format and others like you have a disagreement, and then you have the two positions of participants, and then the model tries to identify one double crux. I gotta say, normally you do this interactively, right? You talk to people and you ask them, the participants, do you agree this is a crux for you? Would you change your opinion if we resolve this factual question? You can't do this here, right? It's not interactive, so it's kind of guessing. But in my format, it's pretty plausible. And yeah, so it's work in progress. What I want to do and I try to do is first I do, but this is like live eval, but I tried quite a lot of it, but you would probably make sure that it doesn't hallucinate too much. Then kind of hope to analyze the topics that are disagreeing about. This kind of helps you track shifts in positions, and also just like what are the debate topics at the time. And again, there's like data since 2014, so I don't know if this is really interesting. This is more a joke, but basically, like I said, this is really like a debate. This is kind of conversational, read along, but we don't get a lot of information. And so this is, I think, one example where we can bring these epistemic tech, could hopefully bring them to like the New York Times and make them like debate a little bit more proactively. Lastly, I want to say, it wasn't mentioned, but there's actually some people that built a bot, there's a last strong post about this, which does interactively just So I haven't done it myself, but just think that that's quite hard in some sense. Cool.
Questions?
You find in prompting that LLMs are pretty good at identifying the double crux. Like they don't need much guidance.
Yeah, well, I had quite a few fails for some reason. I also tried ChatGPT and Claude. But yeah, it's not that's the main challenge. But you do have to be a bit. I mean, I took the prompt quite a few times, and honestly, I would need to apply this a few hundred times and see how often it fails. But so far, it's quite okay. Anything else?
Have you considered like using a voice model and having it be like a, you know, like you have the double crux spot, but there's a like, and you mentioned using it to make these people get to the point faster. Do you imagine like actually using this as like a live debate moderator?
Yeah, again, it's not live. I think there is people who built this bot. I'm kind of curious how they did the eval, right? So, but yeah, you really have to play along. And to stress, right? I mean, these cruxes are guesses. I mean, the God has to get that both these people will agree this is a crux. And from what I see, like, yeah, this is plausible in most cases, but it is a guess to verify. Cool. Anything else?
The last in-person demo that we have scheduled is Ollie Fabrica's trying to make GPT 4.5 non-sycophantic via a better system prompt.
Okay. I know. I was just recently playing around with ChatGPT 4.5. 4.5. Everyone says maybe it's magical, maybe it's the first model, can actually be useful. Tried it. I don't know. Largely it was about as sycophantic as all the other models, kept trying to respond with large giant bullet lists, but it had a bit of a hint that there's something potentially really interesting there. So I spent basically all of today, about 4 to 5 hours, iterating on a system prompt, just to get ChatGPT into someone I might actually want to talk to. I wouldn't say I've perfectly succeeded. We can look at my system prompt here. Maybe we can copy it into cursor. Nope. Nope. Right. Let's hit there. It's relatively straightforward. Well, I'm mostly being like your skeptical, opinionated, rationalist colleague, sharp, rigorous, and focused on epistemic clarity over applied consensus, and then a long list of guidelines that we iteratively arrived at after the system became obnoxious in one specific way. Let's try it out. If somebody here is me, let's just try something that I just had. Here's an old conversation I had with Paul Cristiano on Let's Wrong 2 years ago. An old comment of mine. Here's a comment I wrote 2 years ago. I think it still holds up quite well. I'm like, I don't know, early Jeff, probably real bad though, maybe. ChatGPT response, serious sandbizes, me especially interesting about ninja ChatGPT phenomena, pure on LF, and on timing, framing, and even marketing. Response of a bunch of nice arguments, no long paragraphs. Kind of hard to judge from just this demo on whether like these arguments are good. I'm reasonably surprised how good they are as things go, based on my previous experiences. It also sometimes starts sentences like this, which is nice.
Did you just tell it to do that specifically, or?
I have sentences like that. I have one example that starts with IDK. Let me see what I have like. I liked discussing, I had a whole long conversation with it. It was quite nice about Let's Wrong moderation principles. I gave it a long comment of mine where I was like, here are the Let's Wrong moderation principles that I wrote after a comment thread with someone who complained about them. It expanded. And the nice thing that I quite like about the current system prompt that I have is that, it's like, I don't know, man, I think you're basically being too harsh and not giving people the right incentives. And then I push back, I'm like, I don't know, man, it really empirically doesn't work. We go back and forth. I'm like, I don't know, there are clearly better critiques. But then like, I go and do psychometrics, a bunch of research that I've had, and then the nice thing is that it kind of actually, synthesizes various perspectives of various things that I said it. In this case, it like suggests a moderation principle that I hadn't written explicitly into it, but was like one that I independently had come up with. I did indeed feel like, yeah, that synthesis seems pretty reasonable and a generally valid critique. Synthesis, I don't know, overall pretty good.
Are you familiar with eigenrobots prompt?
Yes.
Okay.
It is not, tried it a bit.
Did you feel like you learned a thing from the conversation?
From this one?
Yeah. Or any of the ones today?
From this one felt pretty reasonable. I had like 5 conversations today, of which 2 were useful.
Okay.
Which is like quite good.
If you try and push back this false thing, does it stick to its position, or does it eventually agree with the false thing?
So I found that if I repeatedly insist on a false thing in just like a variety of different ways, I can kind of get it out of its actually being engaging with stuff.
Yeah.
But if I just make a claim, it by default will if I make a not particularly well-reasoned claim, it will just stick to its guns and be like, that doesn't make any sense.
Is it instinctively contrarian? Will it dispute something that's actually it shouldn't be disputing?
So the way I try to design the system prompt is that basically there were various common threads. I'm a bit worried I've made a perfect sycophant. There were various common threads that I gave it where I was quite sure I was in the right. And then when I responded it did indeed respond with, yeah, seems like your opponents were totally wrong and you were totally right. I think you kind of overstated this part a bit, and this part you got a bit too triggered, but I don't know, I think your perspective was right, and their perspective didn't make any sense. And then other common threads, it's like, yeah, I don't know, man, I think you're really failing to see the ball here. Which is not amazing evidence.
Do you have a general sense of how to evaluate this kind of thing? So I guess Anthropic has some sophisticated pipelines or something, although they're still sort of manually editing the prompts, but
Yeah. I mean, the best thing that I have is over the last 2 years, I've slowly built up a private set of questions that I tried to answer with LLMs, where I knew it got things wrong, or I became very frustrated. And then whenever I try things like this, I just go through the 10, 15 prompts, or problems that I try to solve, and just see, does it make the problem solving on that better? And that's the best I have. It's kind of weird that I don't really know how to do this at scale, and the evaluation of whether it helped is often very confusing.
Mostly kidding, but do you worry at all that you've just taught it the right lingo to be a better sycophant for you?
Absolutely. As I said, I was this part that scared me the most was the one where I'm I give it a common thread, and it pushes back first, and then was no man, you're totally wrong. And I'm look, but you didn't consider important counter-argument. And then it's oh yeah, you're right. And I was I felt how I was oh man, I must have been the fact that it first pushed back and then was just you're totally right, that scared me. But maybe it's just totally right.
All right, and then we have one more final special presentation from David Nachman, who is going to be calling in. I'm gonna. What's a good way to get this working?
I will mute.
You can stream?
Here, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can just pull this here so that he doesn't see video.
Okay.
And then I can connect directly to there.
Okay, and I guess David can see the video from my laptop then.
David, can I bring you on just a second?
Okay. You have sound on your laptop?
there's sound through this projector.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Wait a second here. Okay, we have that.
Great.
Okay, David, I think you're unmuted now. Can you try speaking?
No? Say something? David? Let's just try playing from your computer.
Yep, looks like we'll have to do that.
Hear me?
Okay,
Yeah.
we can hear you now. You're just going to be on computer speakers, so not the loudest.
Okay, I'll try to talk loudly.
All right. David, take it away.
Okay, great. So let me try to share my screen. Oh God, no.
Oh no.
Let's see if I think I can do this. Okay, so this is an app where you can type in something that you're trying to make a decision about. And I'm going to switch to one that's already done. Okay, yeah, and so the thing you sort of get is you sort of get this table that has factors on one side and options on another, and the factors are weighted and values have been populated. And then there's this box here where the app is asking the user questions to try to refine this, or try to like understand what factors matter, or things that could be eliminated. And the user can respond to the question, or they can just ignore it and ask their own question to the app or make a request. And at every turn, this table will be updated. So this is sort of like an active engagement, an active collaboration to try to make this thing, this sort of like reasoning artifact better. At the same time, also this sort of like background thing, which is these like other things to consider. So, for example, are there like other factors that maybe should be considered, or are there options that like weren't thought about, or like maybe there's feedback about the weights, or maybe there's sort of like big picture considerations. So there's sort of like this like active collaboration where the user can ask things, and the LLM is asking the user things to try to make this better. Then there's sort of this like background thing going on at every turn, sort of like alerting the user or getting the user to think about other sort of things. Then I think a couple things. So like, yeah, so one thing that I was sort of interested in is like the idea that there's like this like reasoning artifact that was made in part by a large language model, but like the actual computation here it isn't being performed by a large language model, and it's symbolic. And then the idea that there's sort of like collaboration. So this sort of thing exists outside of the large language model. It's sort of this like visible artifact that's shared, and that the user and the AI system are collaborating on. And then the idea that there's both this sort of like active engagement and this sort of like passive background or like ambient thing going on. And then I think like some ways that this could be better is that I think that like rather than just being this list here, it would be nice if some of these things were sort of like in place, right? So if there was some piece of feedback about you should consider this other factor. Maybe it should be here with the factors, or it should be by the most similar factor, or something like that.
All right, David. So that's it. 3 minutes for your presentation.
Okay.
Great. And now we'll take some questions from either the audience or the judges. Question from Lucas over there.
Can you demonstrate clicking around a bit in the app and like what things here are modifiable and which not?
So like maybe I could say something just like, you know, I don't care about commute time.
So we currently don't see the screen on the monitor.
Oh, got it. You know what? I've been sharing the wrong screen.
Oh no.
So that explains why you haven't seen me clicking around. Yeah. So like as I was talking, okay. Sorry, I have like a okay. As I was talking, I was clicking around, but you were not seeing it. Yeah.
Okay,
So you sort of see. So there's sort of these boxes, and then I could say something like, you know, let's drop commute time. So, you know, you could respond here, and that could say things and modify this.
Nice, and that's also the interface by which you like would modify the weights or the scores or something. You're just like
Right, exactly, right. So that could, of course, like, you know, be very specific and say, hey, I want to say something. And now, like, I think a great thing would be to enable direct modification as well.
Yeah.
Right? So I could go in here and change the value or drop a column, drop a row, but then have this sort of like bigger picture refactoring as well.
Is this artifact that we have on screen right now, is that the result of you having done a bunch of iteration? Was this basically the thing that it generated at first?
Until like 10 seconds ago, it was a thing that it generated first.
Cool.
Other questions for David?
Can we see another example, or it would be cool to see it generate one?
Yeah, let me see what tabs I have. Okay, so here is deciding between prioritization of New York City public health programs.
Oh, what we see is where should I go for vacation in the Caribbean?
The tabs all look the same. I should have put the title in the, let's try this one. Oh no, so the thing that's annoying is that, they're being presented in a different order in Chrome, like in the video picker. So I'm just like randomly picking tabs.
We'll get there eventually. Okay. There.
Okay.
Okay. And there's some like a basic like web searching being done under here. So there's like, this is some late citation, or like it's citing some stuff. And then I think that like one thing that I wanted to get to was just like helping the user consider sort of like different modeling paradigms and thinking about different ways to model it, because anyway, like none of this has actually seemed very helpful to me, to be honest.
Why not? It seems pretty helpful if I just look at it, but why has it not been helpful?
I think that there's like I think that there still is like a cognitive burden to like interacting with something like this. As like, what should the weights be? Like maybe there's just, I don't know, like more of a hierarchical thing. And then there was an example which was asking about interventions for an ACL tear, and like one column that it came up with is like the age of the patient, but it's like I could just tell you the age, right? Like my age. So there's some, I don't know. I sort of wish that there was sort of other forms of modeling incorporated here.
Any other questions for David? All right. Well then, thank you so much, David.
Thanks.
So that's it for the demos, I believe, unless I'm missing out any. If not, so I guess the judges will go into a room and take probably like 10, 20 minutes to like talk through what we thought. In the meantime, what I would really like is if the people who hacked on projects want to kind of hang around, maybe stand up, you can go talk with them, try out the project for yourself.